Well, I can tell a ton of you are gonna be upset by this one or disagree with me, but before we get into why and how I made this bold statement, I want to get the point across that it's okay. In fact, it's good that we disagree with each other. Most common viewer who likely clicked on this video thinking, what? That's stupid. Disagreement is good because it gets us thinking, it gets us talking, and it's not necessarily about converting the other person to somehow believe what you believe. It's not about making the right comment, making the right response video to change my mind. It simply means that I'm challenging a common belief that will hopefully make you guys think differently about it and think, hey, that's a true statement. I didn't really consider it. Do I think he's in the right and I'm in the wrong? No, I still think I'm in the right, but I at least understand the opponent's viewpoint a little bit better. So anyways, with that being in mind, and you guys hopefully understanding that disagreement is okay, and in fact, it's good for discussion, it's good for your counter-arguments, it's good for my counter-arguments, in today's video I'll be diving into why I do not think that foldables are the future. Now, right out the gate, let's get our definitions clear. What do I mean by foldables? No, I'm not counting laptops. No, I'm not counting the 3DS. That is technically a foldable device, but in the hot topic of foldables right now, which clearly get a lot of views, that's not the same technology we're talking about. Simply a piece of tech that has a hinge on it that can go back and forth. That is not a new technology. That is not new and up and coming. We're talking about technology that involves a display, a clear, visible amount of pixels warping back and forth to a folded up position to an unfolded position. I'm talking about devices like the Galaxy Fold, the Huawei Mate X, or the up and coming Razer foldable phone, which is literally just a normal phone that happens to fold up into a slightly more compact package. Yeah, tech companies are definitely getting ambitious with this technology, and for the record, it's not entirely new. OLED technology has been around for a while, and any piece of OLED technology has had the potential to flex. In fact, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out, given OLED tech has worked in flexible positions throughout the years, whether it be the Galaxy Round, a phone that was literally built to be round permanently. It didn't unfold or anything, but the technology of OLED displays being able to not be just a flat piece of square pixels that could not warp in any way, that's been around for a while, and I'm sure since the adoption of OLED technology, companies have been trying desperately to implement some type of technology that involves foldable, to take advantage of the fact that, hey, OLED displays, they can warp, you can bend them. How do we build this into a tech? Do we make it a scroll? Do we make it, you know, like a laptop, except the display just keeps going? And might I add, it is quite ambitious, because like a lot of tech YouTubers who have been testing the Galaxy Fold for a while, like they say, it is breaking the form factor of traditional smartphones, which is quite amazing to see in 2019. A phone that's not just a sheet of glass in a rectangular shape, because without question, if you look at the current lineup of smartphones in the world today, they're getting closer and closer to being the same thing. One has a little bit bigger notch than the other, some has a camera hole, one puts it on this side, one puts it on this side. CPUs are getting really fast, cameras are getting really good. It does start to get boring. Even as a tech enthusiast, even as a guy who likes hearing about new and up-and-coming technology, I agree with you, the smartphone industry is going to get increasingly boring over the years. The days of giant upgrades and giant redesigns, and in fact, I personally believe the era of the super cycle, of a new phone coming out that everyone feels like they have to run out and get because it's such a massive upgrade, I feel like we've reached the end of that, or at very least, we're on the downhill slope of that, as in the biggest amounts of upgrades in smartphones you could have ever expected have already happened. In my opinion, there will never be another phone that's as drastic as an upgrade as the iPhone 7 Plus to the iPhone 10. Those came out within a year of each other, and there was so many drastic changes between just those two devices. I can't imagine another phone upgrade that would be that drastic, and that includes even a foldable one. But there are fundamental flaws I see with foldable technology that may get better over time as companies desperately try to make them relevant and make them exciting so that people can say, ooh, I need to run out and get that foldable phone. I feel like a lot of tech YouTubers and press people who are testing out the Galaxy Fold or pumped to try out the Huawei Mate X are ignoring a lot of the facts of the situation that you cannot avoid. The first one being that the smartphone industry is in decline, and you really have to investigate why is it in decline. Is it really because phones are not being as exciting or innovative as they were in the past, or is it because the phones people are buying today or even last year are so decent and are so good enough for what we need our phones to do that it's getting increasingly difficult for everyday consumers to justify a new purchase, to justify getting another phone because their last generation one works fine. Obviously, it's a combination of multiple things. I'm not saying the smartphone industry is completely in decline because consumers are happy with what they have. There's definitely a factor of they don't see a good reason to go out and buy a new phone, but foldables, in my mind, are not going to convince the masses that they all need to go out and buy new phones, particularly if they're going to buy more expensive ones than they already have, like many up-and-coming technologies where us on YouTube try to decide, is this a gimmick or is this the future? Is all tech going to follow in this gimmick's footprints, or is this one of those weird pieces of technology that we see for a while and then it goes the way of the Galaxy Beam, as in projectors that are built into our phones? Before that tech was implemented, a ton of people thought that was the future. What if you could build a projector screen into your smartphone and then blast a video on any room you wanted to watch a movie in? A lot of people thought that's what it was gonna be, and the phone came, people weren't really that into it, and then it died away, and now you never even think about that kind of technology. No one's expecting or hoping that the next OnePlus or the next Xiaomi phone has a built-in projector. Even though at one time that's what everyone thought the future was going to be, that's a more accurate representation of how I see foldables. A lot of tech YouTubers right now compare it to the Galaxy Note series. Well, you guys don't think the Fold is the future, but that's what a lot of people said about the Galaxy Note. They thought that would never take off. For one, that's a bad example because Samsung profits have been tanking recently in Q1 and in Q4, and that's the majority of where the Note 9 came out, which is evident that the Note 9 as a smartphone isn't actually selling very well. The Galaxy S9 didn't sell well either, but that's not a Samsung problem, that is an industry problem. The smartphone market as a whole is in decline, and it's my belief that it has nothing to do with the new phones coming out not being innovative or not introducing cool enough things. It has everything to do with the phones that are coming out being good enough and not aging that poorly that people don't see the need to upgrade anymore. Several reports have said that people used to buy a new phone on average around every 3 years, and more recently in 2018 and 2019, that average time is increasing to 4 years. Now people can buy a phone and can easily expect it to last them another 3 to 4 years, and if that's an iPhone, probably even 5 or 6. I don't think the comparison to foldables are just like the Galaxy Note is really fair, because to me the technology implemented into a Galaxy Note is barely different from a flagship phone. All it essentially was from the beginning was big phones. So phones are typically a certain size. What Samsung did with the Galaxy Note was make a phone a lot larger than what most people were expecting, and that meant that they could implement a stylus on the inside, which I think is a much easier feat and not that different from flagship phones in the first place compared to foldable phones, which involve a ton of compromises that you have to get past, not including that doubled price point. I'm willing to point out the pros and cons to foldables, starting with the pros. You get a larger form factor that is more portable. You can fit a 7.3-inch display, or with Huawei an 8-inch display, into your pocket now somewhat comfortably. So you can have a big screen that comes around with you. There's no need to put it in a bag. There's no need to hold it. It can fit in your pocket like a smartphone does, but you have a lot more screen real estate to work with. Great, that's a good pro. Now, what are the compromises with this new up-and-coming technology? For one, we know that it's expensive, and you really cannot ignore that because we're not talking about it's a little bit more expensive. It's not like 5G where it's like, yeah, that'll be the future someday, but it's going to take a long time to implement. And with phones like the Galaxy S10 5G, it costs a lot more than the standard Galaxy S10. It has a lot of extra features, but in that case, the 5G adaptation is an extra $300. Maybe if we threw out the slightly larger size and the time of flight sensor, let's just say that adding 5G to a phone in 2019 probably makes it cost an extra $200 or $100 more expensive than just the standard phone that doesn't ship with 5G. So you can see in that case, it's a piece of technology that's a little bit futuristic, it's a little bit ahead of its time, so it costs a little bit extra. With the Galaxy Fold, we're not talking about a little bit extra. We're talking about twice the price of a present-day flagship. The Galaxy Fold starting at $2,000 with the Galaxy S10 Plus, an incredibly good phone coming out in 2019 at $1,000. This is not just a little bit extra money, and I also don't think it's safe to say, well, first-generation tech, it's expensive at first, but as time goes on, it'll get cheaper. Very rarely does first-generation tech get that much drastically cheaper to the mainstream audiences out there. Let's take that in comparison to the first-generation iPhone. Even Marquez wanted me to compare the Galaxy Fold to the first iPhone when it came out, which was definitely, without question, full of problems, and it did technically get a little bit cheaper the following year, but not as drastically as the Fold did, and there also wasn't technology that could replicate the OG iPhone's experience for cheaper. That wasn't a thing. You can't really use the same argument with the Galaxy Fold. There weren't really two products you could buy that could grant you better experience experiences than the OG iPhone could. But today in 2019, there are plenty of devices you can buy under the Galaxy Fold's price point that will give you not the same experience, but in fact better experiences. Bigger screens, more premium materials, better water resistance, faster CPUs, better battery life. The list will go on and on and on, even when comparing to Samsung's own hardware. So the OG iPhone, when it first came out, was expensive for a smartphone for a lot of people, but a lot of people bought it and were on board with it because it was unlike anything they had ever seen before, with that multi-touch and scrolling, and clearly Apple had put a lot of thought into it. The following year, it did get a little bit cheaper with the iPhone 3G, but it was not half the price, okay? And then it became popular. In fact, the iPhone consistently has gotten more and more expensive over time, and it didn't take it just a couple years to get as expensive as the first generation version. For one, the smartphone industry was not in major decline when the OG iPhone came out. In fact, a lot of people mark that as the beginning of the smartphone industry. That's where it started to take off, and once Apple implemented the App Store and Android started getting some traction, that's where a lot of people consider the birth of the smartphone market. Year over year now, we're seeing smartphone sales decline, and you know what smartphones are actually selling really well? It's not the flagships. It's not the most expensive ones. It's the ones that consolidate and try to think about what the consumer really needs. Let's just talk about the necessities for a new iPhone and implement that into something that's somewhat of a cheaper package. Those are the ones that are selling well. It's the iPhone XR, the more affordable iPhone, not the XS Max. It's the Galaxy S10e. It's the people who need a new phone, but they don't need 3 cameras on the back. They don't need fingerprint readers built into the display. They just need something that covers the basics. It can survive a fall, it can survive a drop in the pool, and it's going to do everything they need, which is watch videos, browse social media, do some basic texting, respond to email, and they can do all that comfortably in a reliable package that's going to last them 3 to 4 years down the road. Those are the phones that are going to last, and I feel like people talking about the Fold like it's the future are ignoring the reality that the smartphone market is declining quickly, and I don't think the solution is, oh, you can fit a little bit more screen in your pocket now, with the compromise of water resistance, with the compromise of durability. Go check out The Verge's review and you can see they used that phone for a couple of days and it was already scratching like heck. Screen protectors are a whole different story on foldables, and with the Huawei Mate X, even though it looks a lot cooler than the Galaxy Fold, it's $2,600. We're not even talking about, well, maybe someday down the road it'll get more affordable. We're talking, no, even if this thing was half the price, it wouldn't sell because there's so much better technology that's going to allow your phone to last longer, and you don't have to worry about water resistance or the display scratching so easily because it's made of plastic. And to the people out there that say Corning is working on foldable glass, it's just really, really thin, and over time we're gonna find ways to make foldables more durable than they currently are, all of that is going to cost more money. So it doesn't really go with the narrative of, well, over time it'll get cheaper, but also over time the technology will have to improve somehow that we don't know how to improve it yet. Somehow we're just gonna make glass that can fold and it'll be more durable, and also we're gonna make that and make it cheaper than plastic already is. Doesn't line up for me. I don't see the practicality there. When I hear about that, I say, if anything, to make the device better, you're gonna have to charge even more than you're already charging, and besides that, people are already buying more affordable phones now that aren't $1,000, whether it be the iPhone XR, OnePlus series taking off, more and more people switching to OnePlus, or the Galaxy S10e, the cheaper, the more reasonable of all of the new Galaxy S10 phones that's more of a good bang for your buck. Those are the phones that tons of people are going out and buying because they know they can get them and have them last a good 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and they don't have to upgrade as much. To come in with the foldable technology and say, well, we're gonna have to compromise on XYZ, remove the durability of the screen, remove that premium feeling of glass, remove that water resistance and durability that you're used to, in order for you to have a slightly better screen real estate that can fit in your pocket. I'm sorry, I just don't think most people out there are gonna justify that. I don't think it's worth it to the average consumer. And like Apple says, there is 1,000 no's for every yes. And in my mind, like I said, I very well could be wrong, I think this is one of those no's. I think this is one of those, it's kind of interesting, it's kind of cool that you were able to make a device that can fold like that, but for an everyday consumer product for the future of technology that consumers are going to be carrying around with them, I don't think this is it. I compare it more to the Galaxy Round or the Galaxy Beam more than I do the Galaxy Note, because it's one of those ambitious projects that people think they want until companies start trying to implement it and start trying to make it and realize this tech is insanely expensive with a dozen compromises for one benefit, and for the consumers, that price point is the main stopper. And I don't think that somehow making it more durable and making glass that can fold repeatedly is going to make it cheaper somehow now? No, if anything, it's going to get more expensive. It's going to get worse. There may be a Galaxy Fold 2, and maybe if there's enough people interested, a Galaxy Fold 3, but I completely imagine this being one of Samsung's gimmicks that ends up getting discontinued, and Samsung just decides to call it and say, you know what, this has been a very troublesome product. Huawei experiences the same thing and just decides, yeah, we're not going to do this anymore. We're just going to stick with the standard rectangle glass phones for our flagships because that's what the majority of people are buying, and that's ultimately what companies have to invest their time into, is what consumers really want. And I know that's not fun. I get it. A ton of people are bored of the standard glass rectangles, but companies have to focus their time and make products based off of what the everyday consumer wants, not based off of what the tech YouTubers want or what the tech YouTubers find the most interesting. They're not catering to us. They're catering to the masses. And as much attention or as much praise we give them right now, if the dollars don't speak for themselves, they're not going to keep going with it. Now, I've made a video about what I think of Apple making a foldable, as I'm sure a lot of you have commented, if Apple made a foldable, he'd change all his minds about it. So I encourage you to go back and watch that video if you want to hear me talk about why I think foldables aren't the future, but if Apple did make one, it would probably be the best out there because Apple gets tablets better than any of these companies attempting foldables right now, which are basically saying, look, you can Google search and text simultaneously. Wow, 3 apps at once. The endless possibilities. But these Huawei, Samsung companies making tablets, they aren't selling very well at all. Apple's the only company successfully selling massive amounts of tablets, is actually having an increase in sales year over year. So yeah, they get the software. They would get the 2-in-1 probably better than anyone, but that doesn't mean it's the future and that doesn't mean it's good. I think Apple will see this technology, and while they're definitely experimenting with it, they're going to see that price point, the expensiveness, the compromises you have to make, let alone the fact that no matter how durable the material gets, or no matter how thin it is, or no matter if you use glass or plastic, if you repeatedly bend something back and forth, it will get weaker. It will crease, and you cannot avoid that. That is simple physics. There's no material that you can bend endlessly, and that's severely going to affect the longevity of these products, which longevity in 2019 is a huge factor people are looking for when they buy their phones. No one's going to want to buy a $2,000, or even, let's cut the price lower, maybe the Galaxy Fold 2 is cheaper at $1,400. Still, no one's going to want to have to buy a new one every single year. If it's that fragile, the crease gets worse, the build quality gets weaker over time, and case in point, the Galaxy Fold's delay is just step one of many of the flaws I think the design is going to have over time. Even when they figure out how to make the screen protector not break the entire device, I still personally think the Galaxy Fold's going to run into more longevity problems once people actually start getting them. That's if Samsung decides to release it. Hopefully they do, and they can learn from this. But that's why I don't believe foldables are the future. To me, it's a simple case of all of the compromises don't outweigh the one pro of bigger form factor, because there's too many things you have to pay for, there's too many longevity problems, too many durability problems, and I get why you're excited for it because the smartphone industry is really boring right now. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the future just because it's interesting. Let me know what you guys think of foldables. Are they the future? Am I wrong? I'd love to hear all your guys' opinions on it down in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.